All right, just as a reminder, we will generally stick to one question per person. Gabby, my student here, will bring the mic around. So if you raise your hand and I'll call on you, Gabby can bring you the mic. Any questions for any of our four speakers here? Stuff. And as a reminder, please state your name and before your question.
So my name is Stavashul, and I have a question. I think it's for anyone who's willing to answer or wants to answer. And it's because of a debate I had recently with a pro-Palestinian protester next to the alma mater at the center of the university. And basically we got to discuss, and we talked about anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism and so forth. And we realized that basically one of the base problems of our disagreement was sources of information. We're living in two different bubbles where the facts, the worldly facts are different. And Jacob, I think you've mentioned maybe going away from facts and into gut, so maybe you would like to say something about it, but I basically realized that every person has the reliable sources of information and the unreliable sources. And to the students, maybe you know something about TikTok, which I'm not on, apparently I'm too old for that, but which is a source of information for many people today. And basically whenever an unreliable source, for me, let's say maybe the Hamas Ministry of Health says one thing, and let's say the US intelligence agencies, they say a different thing, I would say, oh, the reliable thing means that the unreliable thing is lying. And we get stuck in these systems where we just live in separate worlds of facts, and we can't talk. There's just no conversation. How do we deal with these sort of scenarios? So any panel member that's willing to talk about that.
Thank you.
Well, the first thing to say is that in some ways that conceptual psychological reinforcement process of amplifying and saturating people within their information bubble is probably, at least as bad as you're suggesting, but perhaps worse. In a campus situation, you have, first of all of the standard internet reinforcement of given ideological communities, which is so powerful and so overwhelming at this point. Our vantage point on the dangers that can result in here in the US or in Europe is very warped. We don't actually see how perilous it could be. But there are countries where social media has enabled mass murder, where mass murder has really been organized on social media. Sri Lanka, the Rohingya, where the massacre was reinforced by social media. So it can really produce violence. In a campus setting, the added factor that you've got is social reinforcement. That is, you're not just getting information, you're also getting interactions with people within your group, and you're getting tremendous social reinforcement for that particular point of view. If you're actively engaged with an anti-Zionist group, you're going to get party invitations. You'll get social interactions. You'll get this whole panoply of reinforcements that really instills those values in you. So the problem is maybe even worse than you think it is, or maybe just didn't elaborate to that degree. There's no easy way to overcome it, but it has to start with diversity of classroom teaching perspectives that are more guaranteed to expose people to not just an idea in an argument, but readings and discussion and extended analysis of political realities that can begin to affect them. So I think that's very hard to do. It means hiring people that can do that teaching, and it means facing the fact that some programs are doing very destructive work and need to be restrained in their freedom to do that. That's, after all, we're in the business of education, and so you have to start there with really using the power of education to change attitudes. But it won't be easy because, many of us who do anti-Zionist work assume that, who do Zionist work, whoops. Obviously it's gotten into me when I didn't even know it. Many of us who do that work assume that the completely convinced people are hopeless. So you aim for the undecided people in the middle, trying to reach them. I think there's a potential of reaching them with information. But some of the dedicated anti-Zionist campus groups have members that are lost. There's nothing you can do for them.
I would just add two things. First of all, what you described could be said about Republicans and Democrats. I mean, it's not something that's symptomatic only of the issue around anti-Semitism. So this reinforces the point that this is everything is here that we're discussing in this room is part of a larger malaise within society and challenges to society. The second thing is part of the larger malaise in society is rooted in the deficiencies within the academy. In other words, if you can't in this framework have a logical discussion, respect the other, have curiosity for the other, then you're not going to be able to do it in sort of the world that we live in. So if one isn't given the tools here, one won't have them for the rest of one's life. And that's the real thing. And I'm not talking about, I'm talking about, why do people support Donald Trump? And a lot of them do. I mean, do people have interest in understanding where those people come from? So these are questions that have nothing to do with that, and I think keeping it at a high level is important. And the last point I would say is that according to a pollster who works in the field, the highest indicator for anti-Israel, anti-Zionism is if you are on social media. If you post on social media, that is the best indicator that you are likely to be anti-Zionist and anti-Israel. So social media is a very, very bad platform also for reflection on what society thinks. In other words, it's at a very extreme. And the last thing is always remember the audience. The audience isn't the guy you're talking to who's sort of on the other end, but it's the people in the middle. And the people in the middle are in the woodwork. They're not at the protest, and seeking them out and seeking at least a curiosity, a joint venture in curiosity. You learn about me and I'll learn about you, I think is the way to start. But again, as the Vice Provost said, these are problems that are writ very large for American society.
I want to add to that with social media and all of the different sites that people use, there are so many different apps and outlets to get your information that people will tend to just, we're probably all victim to this, to use the apps and the sources that we want to use. And a lot of people, this age lack critical thinking to look at another source. With the hospital bombing, a lot of people, even New York Times journalists, didn't double check their sources. And to reiterate what's been said, the common 10-80-10 rule, the 10% of people, you're not going to change their mind. 10% of people agree with you or support you. It's the 80% of people in between, and those are the people you need to educate, because the individuals you're arguing with at alma mater, at the encampments, they're not going to change their mind. They're out there, they are with their group, they chose the source they want. It's those people who haven't already made up their mind, and those are the students and individuals throughout their life that I think education is the answer to that.
Let me just add one thing, because Jacob, in your presentation, you put up the 2022 AMCHA report, which is, AMCHA based in California, it has the largest database of anti-Semitic incidents on campus of any other organization. Huge database collected over a number of years. And you can ask a question which they answer in their report, which is, what is the single most reliable predictor of multiple anti-Semitic incidents on campus? Is there one thing that is the most reliable predictor? And the answer is yes, and it's very simple. the presence of 5 or more anti-Semitic faculty members on campus. If you have 5 or more anti-Semitic faculty members on campus, anti-Zionist / anti-Semitic, there will be multiple anti-Semitic incidents. Believe me, we passed the 5 level a long time ago. It means hiring people and not granting tenure to people and trying to change the faculty climate. And the next greatest example after 5 faculty is the presence of an SJP chapter on campus. That's hardly surprising, right? You just wouldn't guess that relatively for a big institution like this, so few as 5 anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic faculty would be a predictor for multiple events.
Any other comments about the post-fact world that Jacob mentioned, that Stav asked about?
I mean, I think there's a lot of issues in the tenure process, and that can perpetuate anti-Semitism.
Okay, great, thank you. Stav as well.
Tenure as a concept in the institution. I'm not, and I speak Frank Salami, Boston College, and I am tenured, and I don't think tenure is a good model. Not for everybody, but for a big majority. That's not scientific. This is an observation. But unfortunately, that's what we deal with nowadays in the academy, passing up opinions as scholarship, as fact. Jacob spoke about, the crazies that we leave in the corner, and then all of a sudden they have taken possession of the keys to the asylum. And I'm wondering what to do about this beyond what you said, if you could elaborate on that, because to me, this has been a long time coming. It's not a modern development. I remember I'm old enough to remember from back in the early 80s, Yasser Arafat, because I was here in America and I was listening to what Arafat would say to his Arab brethren and what he would say here to Anglophone audiences. And I distinctly remember some of the statements he would make about, in Arabic, like, not to worry, the Crusaders were here for 2 centuries. This is, and we got rid of them. We're still in the beginning of the 1st century of this kind of crusader, and he was using this language. 1982 at the UN in Geneva, he said another form of what you alluded to, sort of, cultural, not cultural expropriation, but the replacement of the Jew, basically denuding the Middle East of Jewish history. I think it was mentioned in multiple interventions. He said something to the effect that we know how to, settler colonialism. We know how to fight colonialism. Jesus Christ was the first fida'in who carried his sword on the path upon which Palestinians today are carrying their cross. So I'm wondering how do we respond to this sort of, what essentially amounts to historical vandalism, beyond, the crazies are now taking hold of the asylum.
Thank you, Frank.
I think there are two aspects to it. First aspect, and I think Brett had a slide on, the archaeologists saying that there are no, and then he actually brought 4 proofs. I think, and this is something that faculty on the other side are very bad at, you have to fight like hell. I mean, there just isn't. It's slowly dawning on people that there's a real problem, but it hasn't gotten to the stage where it's translated into action. And and I'm afraid, and I'm speaking here about certainly the Jewish community and certainly Jewish faculty, that before they will actually be prompted to act vigorously, it'll be too late. Because it will take, sort of a catastrophic event for that to happen. That's just the way, the nature of things. But I can't, I mean, faculty have to act vigorously and immediately to sort of push back. And again, I don't think that, I mean, I'm very pessimistic. You know, it's like holding off the dam before the whole village floods. Like, you gotta, like, you know, it's like the storm is here, and like if you don't literally push back, the dam is going to collapse. And I don't think, again, I may be exaggerating, I don't think I am, but I don't think people realize the severity of the situation. For the long-term, thriving of the Jewish community in the United States. And it starts with professors here. I mean, you gotta do it, and you gotta do it very, very loudly and very vigorously at this point. The second thing is, apropos mentioning Arafat and the Crusaders, and I can say this of us in Israel, we simply don't take seriously enough the jihadist proposition. And we simply, and the proof of that is October 7th. We simply don't, because we're Western, because we're a democracy and averse to conflict, because we're positive looking, because we're distracted, we don't take seriously enough things like it'll take 2 centuries to get us out, you know, to get the Jews out of there. And they're serious. And so this is a much more fundamental problem than one realizes, and it has to start with things like education. There's a huge, in my view, about to be squandered opportunity in Gaza, where, you know, if you're going to destroy something, well, you have a chance to rebuild it differently. And again, that rebuilding, at least as of now, is not taking place. But and I'm speaking on the Israel side, this is the flip side of this, but if Israel doesn't urgently work to create another alternative path for Palestinians, certainly for Gazans, because that's pressing now, then Hamas is going to be back. So it's the same thing. In other words, Hamas will have won for sure. So I'm pessimistic on both sides of the ocean, and I don't think, to your point about Arafat, certainly Israelis do not understand the determination, and I don't think the West is quite ready for what is happening here with this nihilism, this anti-Americanism, this pro-Islamism, this Green-Red alliance. I don't think that it's because it's new. I don't think people appreciate its debilitative value, and I think that it could really undermine the United States as the leading power in the world, which is the capacity it has today. And so there's a huge challenge here for Americans. There's a huge challenge for Israelis. There's a huge challenge for American Jews. So it's a very momentous time we're living in.
If I may, I have to
Sure. Yeah, we go.
just a comment, not a question. I don't, speaking to this not understanding, I don't know how many of us are aware of another October 7th. Anyone? There was an October 7, now that you're saying this, an October 7, 2001, from a cave in Afghanistan, a few days after 9/11, bin Laden made a declaration in the name of the God who raised the heavens without columns. We have sowed fear in the hearts of Americans from the north to the south, from the east to the west. And this goes to what Cary was talking about, the spoils of war, the image that you subjected us to for 45 minutes, the trophy. I mean, this was bin Laden's aim, to sow fear in this raid, and this trophy picture may be the symbol of this other ghazwa, of this other, not 9/11, but 10/7.
Yeah,
And this is not mine, by the way, it's a French political scientist who pointed me to that date. It's very interesting.
thank you. You know, thank you, Frank. Jacob, I like your imagery of the holding back the dam. I think that it's urgent, right? We're in an urgent situation. As Danny also pointed out, you have the younger generation, as I showed in the poll, 51% thinking that Israel should be ended and Hamas should be in charge. And there was kind of two models that, that we were playing with. One that I've been thinking of is the idea that you can't fight fire with fire. You can't fight lies with more lies, right? And you have to fight lies with facts. But it takes a lot longer, and it's a lot less sexy. And it's, sort of the other model was Jacob's point, which is that you need the gut, right? You need to show the positive things. You need to show the emotional good things. You need to show all the benefits in a way that is visceral and positive, viscerally positive in a way. And those are very different models, but if we're in this extremely urgent struggle, we need to find maybe a way to do all of them in some way. I mean, you have to go with all of it. And I also think that the idea of fighting lies with lies, I mean, I am, because I've heard a lot, people say, where is Israel on the public relations front, right? And one thing that kind of occurred to me is that, well, Israel doesn't have a division of propaganda, right? Like the countries that it's competing with for the hearts and minds of the world. And I think that's great. I'm glad that Israel and America don't need to commit to divisions of propaganda to spread lies and to sow chaos, but it makes it a very much harder to combat these things as well. We had Yarden over there.
Make one quick comment, which is that we're painting a bit of a depressing portrait, right? Yesterday's performance celebration on campus was not depressing, and so I think that helps, and that might help stimulate the faculty a bit if they realize that they're responsible for helping to support that student joy. Maybe they'll step up to the plate more. But we're at a contradictory moment because so much has happened since October 7th. Faculty, I think, do feel the need to speak out if they haven't done so before, the need to take action. But simultaneously, in relation to what Frank said, they're more frightened than they were before. I mean, they're scared, and they think there's more risk in speaking out. In response to the sort of depressing overall picture, I can tell you my personal solution, which is that when I embark on a project, I don't look for the confidence that it will change the world. I ask, what is it that I can do? And before I go to bed at night, I say, what can I do tomorrow morning? What's the next step that I can take? And that's really all I ask of myself is, how do you put the next foot forward without a guarantee that you can be successful?
Thank you. Great, Yarden's been waiting patiently. Yesterday's events that Cary refers to was hundreds of students and members of the Jewish community going out, dancing, celebrating the positivities, the realities of Israel and America. So.
Hi, my name is Yarden. Thank you all for speaking. Again, I thank you for this whole event. It's very meaningful. I wanted to ask the students, sorry to bring us kind of more to a depressive state as well, but so I'm doing my PhD here, and it was great until now, and now I basically can't wait to go back to Israel, but also I don't even know if I want to be a part of academia anymore, right? Because just conferences have become hard. There is an email circling around of people from my specific area who are calling for support for these protests specifically, and not saying that they're not anti-Semitic. All of this is going around, and I don't know if I want to be a part of it. And I feel like you have a lot of knowledge about this, and you're dealing a lot with this, and generally you're here, and this is where you're from. And I just wanted to know how you feel about this and how you see your future in this, especially if you're in grad school. So how are you thinking about this? And thank you.
I think the most important thing is to stay. As much as you can. Obviously, if it's dangerous, if there's a time that it's dangerous, to not stay then. But as of now, to stay, because terrorism wins when they make you change your life and your everyday, and they make you scared every day. And as we've been saying, the importance of academia and professors showing students in not anti-Semitic views, and you and everyone can be the change, and you can be the change, and it's very scary, but it's also very strong. Like, it's very strong for you to be in this world. And my undergrad was in psychology here, and there was a lot of anti-Zionism then and anti-Semitism then, even before October 7th, and it can be very scary to leave, but I think staying and being the change you want to see in academia is just as important as fighting in the front lines, protecting the Jewish people in Israel, is protecting the Jewish people in America.
I definitely agree with Anna. I think it's important for us to recognize that we are a minority. Like, they want us to be silent, they want us to be censored, and like I'd have first-hand experience, dealing with people who disagree with my beliefs, and having my name circulated in group chats, and having professors treat me differently because of my views. And I agree with Anna. It's definitely scary, but being in this environment, being like connected to all these people, that's how you create change. Right now we're all like around people who have very similar beliefs, so it's easy for us to express ourselves, but putting ourselves in these uncomfortable situations and talking to people, whether that's specifically in my role, being on the quad or walking around with an Israeli flag and trying to engage with people and educate them about what's going on, like, that's how you reach the people. I'm not going to reach anyone at the encampment, I'm not going to reach anyone at SJP, but I can reach, the Illini student that just wants to go to the union and just, do their studies. And so I think just being in this uncomfortable space, trying to share your perspective, but also in academia, you're going to have a role where you can provide guidance for future generations and future leaders who want to make change. And this is going to have a ripple effect that's going to carry on for generations, and it's going to make the fight a lot easier. So that's my opinion.
Thank you. Khalifa was next. No.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about foreign funding.
Take the mic.
I just wanted to ask Jacob about foreign funding, because the protests seem to be organized, and probably like the academia has, when they shout death to America, death to Israel here in the United States, for me it seems very organized and funded from foreign sources. Is there any way to push back or fight it?
So, by the way, it's a little scary, because I was, again, I think going there was very instructive, and I encourage everyone to at least sort of experience a little bit of the protest, of the encampment here, just to understand, again, that part of that curiosity. So there was a gentleman who walked by and he said, "Can someone explain to me?" And they said, "No, our spokesperson isn't here, we're not allowed to talk." That's a very sort of tyrannical,
Authoritarian.
that's the word I'm looking for, thank you, authoritarian discipline, which is in theory foreign, sort of double meaning to American students, but and there have been evidence of sort of the same tents come up, and all sorts of things. The Qatari funding is something that's been an issue for many years. The schools some schools are under investigation for not actually divulging their sources of funding as they are required to the Department of Education, although they're allowed to receive funding. But that's something that, again, requires more awareness. I'm not aware, although there's interest in this issue, of actual how these current protests are being funded. But believe you me, people are not just people are investigating it. I do want to that interests me a little bit less. What interests me more is what the students just said about that fighting spirit, because a lot of this is psychological. This war, it's not actual. And by the way, it is a war. I mean, you guys are there's the war in Israel and the war here, and this is no less than a war. It's not fought with arms, thank God, and that. and very few people get physically injured. But it is a war, and fighting it is essential. First of all, for the future of the Jewish community in the United States, but also it's very essential for Israel because, unlike some Israelis think, Israel is not a superpower and cannot exist without alliances. And history teaches us that when 2,000 years ago, the Jews in Israel thought, Rome, who cares about them? Well, they learned the hard way what that meant. But in this world also, Israel requires strategic alliances, and the United States is Israel's strategic partner. And if that were to change, that would have a real impact on Israel. And I think that that's something that's already beginning. So the fighting on the ground here, so to speak, is essential, and the effort to, as part of that, the effort to unravel what's going on there, the effort to understand, how this came about, the effort to from an academic perspective, to research it and to show sort of how this trajectory evolved, I think is very important, very useful. So like Cary said, everyone can do something and every effort counts, and it's just sort of being in a state of mind of really, you got to really push back. And I think the students are really at the front lines, and the faculty should join them.
Thank you very much, Helene. I saw Helene, then Doug. That probably will wrap it up then for the Q&A. Oh.
I think that the students are at the front line, but in a very different way that really constrains faculty who are Zionist and anti-Hamas. And Cary, it's a question for you that in this era of quote-unquote snowflakes and trigger warnings, how do faculty deal with the fact that if you present in the context of a lecture something that is factual, and then a student or students go to your department saying that, and then an administrator says to you, well, you didn't give equal time to the terrorists. How do we cope with that as faculty trying to teach, and yet in an administrative environment where administrations themselves, we see it all around us on these other campuses far more than here, are completely cowed by the students. So we have academic freedom, we have tenure, and yet I think, and I ask you, do you think that we are now extremely constrained when trying to, in a relevant way, relevant to a course, present something that others simply don't want to hear, and they have the power, remarkably, to gain the support of faculty? What do we do?
Thank you, Elaine.
Well, it depends in part upon what institution you're at. I mean, there are schools where faculty will come to one another's defense on the grounds of academic freedom and help protect one another. And there are other institutions, to go to the other extreme, where you really are on your own, and that's it. So not all institutions are equally vulnerable to facetious student complaints. Some are, and that, even if they're unjustified, I mean, the literature on anti-Zionism includes, if you look at the two books co-edited by Andrew Pessin, Anti-Zionism on Campus, came out in 2018, you'll see quite a few stories of students who fabricate a lie about a faculty member. Not what you said in class was a problem, but what you never said, or what you didn't say at a demonstration. Register a complaint, and you can then undergo a year or a year and a half torturous investigation, which in the end clears you, but it's made your life hell in the process. So that's a real risk if you're at schools where quickly discerning the truth about a complaint is not the goal. The goal is to protect administrators by showing how aggressively they are in investigating and interrogating and torturing you. Giving good advice for people at those schools is very difficult. The practical advice I've always had is if there are demonstrations in public where Zionists and anti-Zionists are in potential verbal conflict or any other kind of conflict, for God's sake, videotape them. Many faculty members have been cleared of accusations by videotapes. The accusations go a certain point, and then someone produces the videotape, and he or she never said what they've been accused of saying, and that's the end. So public events that are conflictual need to be recorded, step one. Step two, I think in the classroom setting, you have to put tremendous energy into winning your students' loyalty, affect, and respect. And you have to anticipate potential complaints that are facetious, and you have to try to build enough loyalty and collective sense of loyalty so that there's some pressure not to do that. And I admit that that's sort of pathetic and suggests a kind of paranoia, but I think it's necessary. You have to win their consent to try to eliminate the possibility that they will tell lies. And finally, I recommended those 2 edited books which tell many of these stories. And one of the awful, awful common elements from institution to institution to institution, a student tells a lie about you. She did this, she said this, she did that to me, and it ain't the case, right? Eventually you're cleared and the student is never punished. You can go through both of those books and read dozens of stories, and they all have that in common, that there's no reliable punishment, no sanctions for telling lies. That's something we have to change. If someone is willing to make a false accusation for someone against someone else, the solution is not just to clear them, the solution is that person telling the lie needs to pay a price. So that would help a lot. I think there's a deterrent value in having sanctions, which could include suspension, being expelled. For lesser offenses, what I recommend is being forced to take a couple of good courses on the history of anti-Semitism and having to sit through it and learn something.
One good course.
Cruel and unusual punishment.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Cary. Doug, please.
Hi, well, my name's Doug Hoffman, and Anna, I direct some remarks to you and questions, maybe folded in here someplace. So, well, maybe a guy my age, I've been a census taker and tried to explain twice and tried to explain those questions to people because they're confusing and they don't make sense. But mostly as a guy my age, the discussions about race just, they don't ring true. And I don't mean that, I know people ask about it, but race is such an ephemeral, bizarre, mysterious, undefinable thing. And intersectionality of multiple identities affects a lot of people. I know a guy, he's a college professor, and his mom is a black Jew by choice, converted long before the guy was born, and his father's my cousin. So, yeah, he's doesn't quite look like his dad and doesn't quite look like his mom. Is he a member of an oppressed minority, or is he Jewish and therefore he's white, even though he sure doesn't look white? These things are hard to define. And in terms of Jews, also, I think, and some other people think, that what binds us together is, and what set the root of our identity is the theological stuff. So let's take Claudia Scheinbaum. It's my favorite case in point these days. likely to be the next president of Mexico. I mean, she's not indigenous. Her parents are from Eastern Europe, but she's born and raised in Mexico. So culturally, I'm not sure I have, and ethnically, I'm not sure I have a lot in common with her. And I'm not sure how religious she is in her practice, but I think of us as co-religionists to some degree, not ethnically, culturally in the same milieu. And the last reason I think about this stuff a lot is, like, if you say someone's Greek, well, they're probably from Greece. And their grandparents or parents probably spoke Greek. If you say someone's Chilean, they're probably from Chile, and you don't know what religion they are. So I've seen lists of ethnic groups, blah, 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 and Jewish. Except if you're from Iran and your native language is Farsi, maybe you can read liturgical Hebrew, that's all I can do. And when you came to this country, I couldn't speak to you in English, I couldn't speak to you in Hebrew, so are we ethnically one people? Or someone only speaks Yiddish or Russian, and I only speak English? So just, these are complex. I know campuses are worried about it, and there's Jews are white and all this kind of stuff as questions, but I'm just making a vote for less racial, more theological. And sorry to kind of pick on you with that. So.
That's okay. To respond to that, I think, we're Jews, we're from Judea, and obviously thousands of years of exile and immigration and different continents, but to go to the core of it, we're all from Judea, and that shows in our genes. Anyone who's born Jewish shows in our genes. Someone who has a Jewish father is not considered Jewish to the Orthodox sect, but they're still ethnically Jewish. They shouldn't lose that identity because they don't practice or because they don't consider themselves Jewish. And I think there's nothing like Judaism. I don't like to compare it to anything else. It can be compared to different ethnicities, but there's nothing like Judaism. And it's really complicated to put an identity to us, and I think it's not necessary to put us in an identity. But the world has created a society where they are obsessed with identities and obsessed with these categories. So right now they are trying to put us in an identity which makes it okay to hate us. And I think taking back that identity and saying, no, like, we are not white, we are Jews, because a Persian Jew and an Ashkenazi Jew still have things in common. They still know what Passover is. They still celebrate the same New Year. No matter what the differences are, there's still similarities that will continue no matter what country Jews end up in next if something happens.
Thank you. Alex, we gotta wait, Alex, till now, because we're out of time. Hold it till the next Q&A. You'll be first, okay? Go ahead, please.
First of all, Brett, I want to thank you. Your presentation, your analysis, your assessment is amazing. And it actually brought to the fore and answered so much of what has been needed, I think, for a long time, but particularly where we are now. And I hope that this conference, and thank you so much as well for Khalifa, is your name? Thank you, and all of you who I was able to catch a little bit here and there through work, is going to be made available because we need this locally for the Jewish community, I can tell you, and nationally and internationally. It was amazing.
Thank you.
I just wanted to bring this, thank you all. I mean, you hit it out of the park. You really did, you truly did, and Helena as well. Helena, what you brought, I never knew the term minas, but now I understand more, and just the historical element and bringing us currently to where we are. But I say also, this is what has been needed in the Jewish community in and of itself for so long. We can think about reaching out to others, which is always important to do, but watching what's been going on the local level, many of us were going out to the Urbana City Council for 3 months. Now, the resolution that was eventually adopted and put forth and worked on was far better than what was proposed at first, which mentioned genocide as fact 5 different times, which was just an indictment across the board with Israel. And yes, this is heart-wrenching, and we can all feel the pain all the way around of what's gone on. Then the township came forth with another resolution of where the vote was something like 76-40. It's an odd, direct democracy, old kind of type of town hall meeting, but a few things came of that. One is the need to organize and the need for people to come forward in a way that has probably been very rare or never really happened much in terms of individuals. It is not anymore only, I still think it's important, about the leadership, about rabbis, about federations, even academia or the ADL. Individuals need to start coming forward. What we found was limitations with each of these organizations as well because of a particular status with the IRS, being mindful of different views, being careful not to lend out quote-unquote membership lists, et cetera. So we have to organize. So we're beginning a list to try to include people who would like to be a part of this, to find projects or action items that may or may not be in the lens or the purview, or for each organization, they still have boards that may be divided on various issues. Even if technically speaking they could do this, they might be able to do that, but the organizations themselves might say, well, maybe we won't. We have to find a route for people who are interested to be able to contact one another. So the fact that this vote for this township, and I only use this to illustrate a point, was 76-40. Now, most of the people probably were Jewish. There were some who came otherwise to be there, which was fantastic. Many were in their 70s and 80s. So there's some great work to be done, but I still feel it is very important to do within the Jewish community itself. So many of us do not know history, our history, different histories. We don't know facts. We're swayed, I think, in where we grow up, our own lens of, say, of being an American, or if we were in progressive communities. It is disheartening to see what's been going on a long time in terms of you've got to check your card. There are things that are reminiscent of the 30s, or my father, who was born in 1926, no longer with us, but I can see this growing up in the Toledo area with the Father Coughlin addresses coming from Detroit, and what that community went through and the fears at that time. So things can become reminiscent, but you're always at a different place. And I guess just to conclude, this playbook that we have no playbook for now, I don't want to say none, and I'm not throwing everything out because I don't think that's correct. I just think we need to revise, we need to incorporate, we need to do what you have done here. It's incredible. And to step forward, I think we've got to be able to adjust for these times that we're in and begin to affirm. It's not just in academia, it's also out in the community. But I will say, in concluding this, a couple of years ago, doing a lesson with some of the kids at Sinai Temple, maybe 8th and 9th graders, I had never gone through all the laws one by one in Germany before. And from 1933 to 1935, step by step by step. And it was amazing to me. I almost got into the rhythm of, wow, how come they didn't just do that one 2 years earlier? They were on it. Why didn't they complete the thought? Wow, it took them a long time to, really take away the status or do something with this group of people, et cetera, et cetera. But you could see the methodology to it, and man, does that happen fast. I'm not saying that's what's happening, but the narrative is happening quickly. What we saw in Urbana happens quickly. It's a non-binding referendum, but now, November 5th, the voters in Urbana will get a ballot that says, okay, whether you want to support Israel or not, that's another matter. American tax dollars, whether it should be conditional or not supported, that's one thing. To claim Israel as an apartheid state, Israel proper, is now spoken as fact, just as genocide is cavalierly thrown out. Everyone is an expert on whether it is, maybe whether it isn't, war crimes, this, that, et cetera. But to just accept that as it is now going to be out there, unfortunately, because the numbers are such. So there needs to be organizing on many levels. But I want to thank you, and I hope that this could be made available. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Yes. That's great. So, thank you so much. Thank you to all of our panelists as well. Thank you, Gabby. That's great. So let's just take a 5-minute break before we have our final two speakers. We'll only be 10 minutes behind. That's not bad at all, because we got some extra time built in.